The Cantina on Zirian Prime reeked of burnt plasma and regret, much like every other establishment that catered to the galaxy's bottom feeders. I'd seen enough dives in my 17 cycles as a Vorthan mercenary to know the difference between a place where you might lose your credits and a place where you'd lose your life. This one, well, let's just say I kept my secondary hearts pumping at combat readiness. Smoke curled through the dim lighting as various species nursed their drinks and nursed their grudges. The usual suspects were all here. Klaxon raiders with their chittering mandibles, Pharaoh-class smugglers whose metallic skin reflected the flickering hollow advertisements, and enough bounty hunters to start their own small war. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, we had entertainment. Look at this pathetic excuse for a warrior. Razak the Destroyer wheezed through his breathing apparatus, his 4 eyes fixed on the corner booth. The Saurian crime lord's reputation preceded him like a bad smell, and his laugh sounded like grinding metal. The Terran Coalition sends us their rejects now. I followed his gaze to the human sitting alone, nursing what looked like synthetic alcohol. She couldn't have been more than 25 Earth years, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation military, not that screamed fresh academy graduate. The uniform was crisp, too crisp for someone who'd seen real action. Her name tag read Martinez, and she wore the insignia of a junior combat specialist. Humans, spat Corvin, a Draknari pirate whose scarred hide told stories of 100 battles. Soft-skinned weaklings who think they can play with the big predators. This one probably pisses herself at the sight of a plasma rifle. The laughter that erupted from their table made several other patrons look over with interest. Nothing drew a crowd like the promise of violence. And in places like this, mockery often preceded bloodshed. Martinez, for her part, seemed oblivious to the attention. She stared into her drink like it held the secrets of faster-than-light travel, occasionally glancing at the door as if waiting for someone. Poor kid probably thought she was meeting a contact for her first real mission. Instead, she'd wandered into a den of the galaxy's most wanted criminals. "Hey, human!" Razak called out, his voice cutting through the ambient noise. "You lost, little girl?" Playground is 3 sectors over. Several heads turned. The bartender, a wise old Centauri with 6 arms, suddenly found the need to clean glasses with extraordinary focus. Smart move. When predators started circling, the clever prey made themselves invisible. Martinez looked up, her brown eyes scanning the room until they found Razak's table. For a moment, I thought she might actually have some backbone. She met his gaze without flinching, which was more than most species managed when facing down a Saurian crime lord. "I'm exactly where I need to be," she replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Thanks for the concern, though. The audacity was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. In my experience with humans, it was usually both." Corvin slammed his fist on the table, causing several drinks to slosh. Did this meat sack just mouth off to Razak the Destroyer? On his own territory? Now, this was getting interesting. I'd heard stories about human tenacity, their apparent inability to recognize when they were outmatched. Most species developed a healthy respect for superior firepower over their evolutionary history. Humans, apparently, had missed that particular lesson. "Meat sack," Martinez repeated, finally standing up. She was shorter than I'd expected, maybe 5.5 feet in their measurement system. Next to Razak's 8-foot frame, she looked like a child challenging a battle cruiser. "That's creative. Did you think of that all by yourself? Or did you have help?" The Cantina went dead silent. Even the automated music system seemed to sense the tension and clicked off mid-note. Somewhere in the back, I heard someone whisper a prayer to their ancestral spirits. This was about to get very messy, very quickly. Razak rose from his seat, his massive frame casting a shadow over half the room. His breathing apparatus hissed with each exhale, and the servo motors in his cybernetic arm whined as he clenched his fist. "You have 30 seconds to apologize before I turn you into a stain on this floor, human." Martinez tilted her head, studying him like he was a particularly interesting specimen. 30 seconds? That's generous. Most bullies I have met only give you 10. I had to admit, the kid had style. Stupid, suicidal style, but style nonetheless. She was either the bravest human I'd ever encountered, or she had a death wish the size of a small moon. Bully. Razak's laugh was like grinding glass. Child, I have turned entire planets into ash. I have made grown warriors weep just by speaking their names. You are nothing but an insect buzzing around a supernova. Funny, Martinez said, taking a step closer. All I see is an oversized lizard with breathing problems trying to compensate for something. That did it. Razak lunged forward with surprising speed for something his size, his cybernetic arm extending toward Martinez's throat. For a split second, I thought the human was done for. Saurians were apex predators on their homeworld, and Razak had enhanced himself with enough military-grade hardware to take on a small army. But Martinez moved. Not away from the attack like any sane being would. She moved into it, ducking under Razak's swing and driving her elbow into his solar plexus with enough force to stagger him. The crime lord wheezed and stumbled backward, more surprised than hurt, but it was enough to show everyone in the cantina that the human had some training. Not bad for an insect, she said, bouncing on the balls of her feet like a prize fighter. Your turn, Scaleface. The room erupted. Corvin and his crew were on their feet in seconds, weapons drawn and aimed at Martinez. She was outnumbered at least 15-1, facing enough firepower to level a city block. Any rational being would have surrendered, begged for mercy, or at least tried to negotiate. Martinez cracked her knuckles. Really? She said, looking around at the assembled criminals. All of you? For little old me? I am flattered. That's when I noticed something odd. Despite the chaos erupting around her, despite facing down certain death, Martinez kept glancing toward the cantina's rear exit. Not like she was planning to run, more like she was waiting for something or someone. Razak had recovered from his surprise and was advancing again, this time flanked by 2 of his lieutenants. You're going to regret the day you crawled out of your primitive mudball, human. Probably, Martinez agreed cheerfully. But not today. Today you die, Corvin snarled, his plasma rifle charging with an ominous whine. Martinez smiled, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt a genuine chill run down my spine. There was something predatory in that expression, something that didn't belong on the face of what everyone assumed was just another soft human. You know what the problem with you people is? She asked, her voice conversational despite the weapons trained on her. You talk too much. The rear door of the cantina exploded inward, that I mean that literally. The reinforced Durasteel barrier, designed to withstand everything from plasma blasts to small explosives, simply disintegrated. Chunks of metal went flying across the room like shrapnel, and through the smoke and debris walked something that made every predator instinct I developed over 17 cycles of mercenary work start screaming warnings that IT was human-shaped, roughly. 7 feet tall, wearing what looked like adaptive camouflage armor that shifted and flowed like liquid shadow. But it was the way it moved that set off every alarm bell in my head. Fluid, economical, each step placed with the precision of something that had spent its entire existence as the apex predator of its environment. Behind the figure's helmet, twin red sensors glowed like the eyes of some ancient demon. And when it spoke, its voice was electronically modulated into something that bypassed the ears and went straight to the part of your brain responsible for primal terror. Martinez. It said, the single word carrying enough menace to make half the cantina's patrons edge toward the exits. You are late for extraction. The human recruit, the supposedly helpless academy graduate who'd been the target of everyone's mockery just moments before, straightened up and snapped off a crisp salute. Sorry, Sergeant Hunter. Had to deal with some local wildlife first. Sergeant Hunter. The name hit me like a plasma bolt to the chest. Every criminal in 3 sectors knew that name, whispered it in the same breath as ghost stories and childhood nightmares. Hunter was Terra's special operations legend, a one-being army who'd single-handedly ended the Proxima Rebellion and turned the tide at the Battle of Kepler Station. And Martinez had just called him Sergeant, which meant she wasn't some fresh-faced recruit after all. Razak, to his credit, recovered from his shock faster than most. 2 humans, he growled. raising his weapon. Makes no difference. There are still 15 of us. Hunter's head turned toward the Saurian crime lord with mechanical precision. 15, he repeated, as if tasting the word. That's more than last time. Martinez, did you request backup for this operation? Negative, Sergeant, Martinez replied, her entire demeanor having shifted from academy graduate to seasoned operative in the span of seconds. I assessed the situation as manageable. Good assessment, Hunter said, and then he moved. I have seen fast before. Hell, I pride myself on being quick enough to have survived this long in a galaxy full of things that want to eat you. But Hunter didn't move fast. He moved like violence itself had taken physical form and decided to go for a stroll. The first 3 pirates went down before they could even register that he'd moved. Not killed, I realized with growing horror, but efficiently disabled with precise strikes that left them writhing on the floor in agony. Hunter was toying with them. Corvin managed to get off a shot with his plasma rifle, the bolt screaming through the air where Hunter had been standing a microsecond before. The armored figure materialized behind the Draknari pirate, like a nightmare made flesh, and delivered a strike that sent Corvin flying across the room to crash into the bar. Meanwhile, Martinez was handling her own section of the fight with a grace that made it look like a deadly dance. She moved between her opponents like water, striking pressure points and nerve clusters with surgical precision. Every movement was economical, purposeful, designed to incapacitate rather than kill. They were showing off. That's when it truly hit me. This wasn't a rescue operation or a chance encounter. This was a demonstration. Martinez had deliberately walked into a nest of criminals, provoked them into action, and then let them reveal their true nature before a backup arrived. She'd been evaluating them the entire time, cataloging threats and weaknesses like a predator studying prey. The humans hadn't stumbled into our territory. We'd stumbled into theirs. Within 90 seconds, it was over. 15 of the galaxy's most dangerous criminals lay groaning on the cantina floor, thoroughly beaten by 2 humans who'd barely broken a sweat. The rest of the patrons sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Hunter surveyed the carnage with what I could only assume was satisfaction. Extraction complete. Local authorities will be here in approximately 10 minutes to collect the criminals. I suggest everyone else finds somewhere else to be. As if summoned by his words, the distinctive whine of approaching patrol craft began to filter through the cantina's walls. Someone had called in the law, and judging by the sound, they were bringing enough firepower to level half the district. Martinez holstered a sidearm I hadn't even seen her draw and looked around the room. Her eyes found mine, and for a moment, I thought she might say something. Instead, she just nodded, as if acknowledging a fellow professional. Then she and Hunter walked out the same door they'd entered through, disappearing into the night like ghosts made of shadow and violence. I sat there for a long moment, processing what I'd just witnessed. Around me, the other survivors were beginning to stir, helping wounded companions and trying to make sense of what had happened. But I couldn't stop thinking about Martinez's smile, that predatory expression that had transformed her from harmless recruit to apex predator in the space of a heartbeat. The galaxy had spent so long underestimating humans, dismissing them as soft-skinned newcomers who'd gotten lucky with their technology. But what if we'd been wrong? What if humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their numbers, but their ability to make everyone else underestimate them? As the patrol craft landed outside and armored figures began pouring through the entrances, I made a mental note to update my personal files. Next to humanity's entry, I added a single word that would guide all my future interactions with their species. Apex point 3 days after the Cantina incident, I found myself doing something I'd sworn never to do in my 17 cycles as a mercenary, actively seeking out humans. But curiosity, as they say, killed the Schrodinger's cat, and I'd always been too stubborn to learn from other species' mistakes. The spaceport on Zirian Prime buzzed with its usual chaos of departing vessels and arriving cargo haulers. I tracked the human ship registration through channels I probably shouldn't have had access to, but when you've spent nearly 2 decades in the underworld, you collect favors like some species collect shiny objects. The relentless Dawn sat in docking Bay 47, a sleek Terran assault frigate that looked like it could punch through a battlecruiser's shields and ask for seconds. Standard coalition military design, but with modifications that suggested whoever owned it had access to some very expensive black market upgrades that I approached cautiously, my hand resting on my sidearm more from habit than actual concern. After what I'd witnessed, I had no illusions about who held the advantage in any potential confrontation. "You are either very brave or very stupid to come here, Vorthen." The voice came from behind me, electronically modulated and carrying that same undertone of barely contained violence I remembered from the Cantina. I turned slowly, hands visible, to find Sergeant Hunter emerging from the shadows between two cargo containers. Without his armor, he looked almost disappointingly normal. He stood about 6 feet tall, built like a coiled spring wrapped in military fatigues. His hair was cropped short and starting to show gray at the temples, and his eyes held the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much combat. But it was the way he moved that maintained that predatory grace, each step calculated and purposeful. Probably both, I admitted. But I had to know what you really are. Hunter studied me for a long moment, those cold blue eyes seeming to catalog every weapon I carried and calculate 17 different ways to disable me before I could draw. Then, surprisingly, he gestured toward his ship. "Martinez owes you an explanation anyway. She said you were the only one in that dive who didn't try to join in the fun once the shooting started." The ship's interior was exactly what I'd expected from a military vessel. Functional, efficient, and designed by people who valued results over comfort. But there were personal touches that spoke to long deployments and crew bonding. A small galley area had been converted into something resembling a common room, complete with mismatched furniture that had obviously been acquired from a dozen different worlds. Martinez sat at a table, no longer wearing her crisp academy uniform. Instead, she changed into well-worn combat fatigues that bore the scars of real action. Her rank insignia, I noticed, wasn't that of a junior combat specialist. IT was that of a lieutenant colonel. "Colonel Martinez," I said, pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. "You are not a recruit at all." She looked up from the data pad she'd been reviewing and smiled that same predatory smile I remember from the Cantina. "Guilty as charged. Coffee? It's real Terran blend, not that synthetic garbage they serve in most spaceports." I accepted the cup gratefully. Good coffee was harder to find than honest politicians in this sector of the galaxy. So what was that performance about? Some kind of undercover operation? Recruitment, Hunter said, settling into a chair that groaned under his weight. "Believe it or not, we were there looking for you." That caught me off guard. Me? I'm nobody special. Just another gun for hire, trying to make enough credits to keep flying. Martinez laughed, and the sound was surprisingly warm. Carrick's Valen, age 43, standard years, 17 cycles as an independent contractor, specialized in extraction operations and corporate espionage. Fluent in 14 languages, qualified pilot on 37 different ship classes, and holder of marksmanship records on 6 different worlds. She rattled off my credentials like she was reading from my personnel file, which, I realized with growing unease, she probably was. "You have also turned down contract from the Hegemony Syndicate 4 times, refused to work for slave traders twice, and once walked away from a 50,000 credit payday because the target was a refugee camp. You're not just another gun for hire, Carricks. You have principles." "Principles don't pay for fuel," I muttered, but I was beginning to see where this was going. Hunter leaned forward, his expression intense. "We are putting together a team for a special operation. Something that requires people with your particular skill set and moral flexibility." "What kind of operation?" Martinez activated a hollow projector built into the table, and suddenly we were looking at a 3-dimensional map of the Kepler sector. Red markers indicated known criminal strongholds, while blue ones showed coalition patrol routes. There were a lot more red markers than blue ones. The Hegemony Syndicate has been expanding their operations in this sector for the past 2 years, she explained. Human trafficking, weapons smuggling, forced labor camps on mining worlds. They have got enough political connections to keep the regular authorities tied up in bureaucratic red tape. So you were going after them unofficially, I said. Black Ops. Something like that. Hunter's smile was cold enough to freeze helium. The Coalition can't officially sanction operations against Syndicate holdings without starting a war. But they can look the other way if a group of freelancers happen to cause some disruptions. I studied the map, noting the pattern of Syndicate strongholds. They've been smart about it, establishing bases and systems with weak local governments or bought-in paid-for officials. Traditional military operations would be messy, politically complicated, and likely to result in massive civilian casualties. You need someone who knows how to move through criminal networks without attracting attention, I said. Someone who can get you close to the targets without triggering their security protocols. Exactly. Martinez highlighted several locations on the map. These facilities are holding approximately 10,000 sentient beings in various forms of bondage. Most are from species that don't have strong interstellar representation. The kind of people nobody misses when they disappear. That hit close to home. My own species, the Vorthans, had been nearly extinct before achieving spaceflight. We knew what it was like to be considered expendable by the galactic community. What's the catch? I asked, because there's always a catch with operations like this. Hunter and Martinez exchanged a look that spoke of long partnership and shared secrets. Finally, Hunter spoke. The catch is that this isn't sanctioned by anyone. If we get caught, the Coalition will disavow all knowledge of our activities. We'll be labeled as pirates, terrorists, or worse. And the Syndicate has put a cumulative bounty of 2 million credits on our heads. 2 million. I whistled low. What did you do to piss them off that badly? Martinez's expression darkened. We hit 3 of their facilities last month, freed about 1,500 prisoners, and destroyed enough infrastructure to set back their operations by at least a year. The Syndicate leaders weren't happy, Hunter added dryly. They have hired some very expensive help to deal with us. As if summoned by his words, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and I heard the distinctive whine of engines spinning up to combat readiness. Speak of the devil, Martinez muttered, already moving toward what I assumed was the bridge. Tactical display on main screen. The hollow projector switched to an external view of the spaceport, and my blood ran cold. 3 ships were approaching in attack formation, sleek, predatory vessels that I recognized as Phantom-class interceptors. Military-grade hardware that cost more than most planets' annual defense budgets. Bounty hunters? I asked. The expensive kind, Hunter confirmed, his hands dancing over weapon controls with practiced ease. Razor Squadron. They have never failed to collect a bounty. Never. Martinez was already suited up in powered armor that made her look like a technological angel of death. There's a first time for everything. Carrix, I need to know right now. Are you with us, or do you want us to drop you at the nearest safe port? Through the ship's hull, I could hear the whine of charging plasma cannons as the Phantom interceptors moved into attack positions. Outside, spaceport security was scrambling to evacuate civilian vessels, but I could tell they weren't going to be fast enough. When the shooting started, a lot of innocent people were going to be caught in the crossfire. Unless someone did something about it, I looked at these 2 humans, this unlikely pair who'd apparently declared war on one of the galaxy's most powerful criminal organizations. They could have run, could have taken their ship and disappeared into the vast emptiness between stars. Instead, they were preparing to fight 3-to-1 odds to prevent civilian casualties. You know what the funny thing about being a mercenary is? I said, checking my weapon and moving toward what looked like a gunner's position. You spend so much time working for the highest bidder that you forget what it feels like to work for something that actually matters. Hunter's grin was savage. Welcome to the team, Carrix. Try not to die in the next 10 minutes. We have got a lot of work ahead of us. The first plasma bolt struck our shields just as Martinez brought the engines online. The relentless Dawn lurched forward, diving between 2 cargo haulers and using them as cover while Hunter returned fire with surgical precision. Razor leader to unknown vessel. A cold voice crackled over the comm system. You are wanted for crimes against the Hegemony Syndicate. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Martinez keyed the ship's comm system, her voice sweet as poison honey. Razor Leader, this is Lieutenant Colonel Martinez of the Terran Coalition's Special Operations Division. You are interfering with an authorized counterterrorism operation. Stand down immediately or face the consequences. The pause that followed was telling. Even experienced bounty hunters thought twice about taking on Coalition Special Ops. Coalition forces have no jurisdiction in this sector, Razor Leader finally replied, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Jurisdiction is such a flexible concept, Martinez said cheerfully, especially when you're dealing with slavers and human traffickers. Carricks, how are those port-side guns feeling? I'd managed to figure out the targeting system, and the lead interceptor was lined up perfectly in my crosshairs, ready to educate some bounty hunters about the cost of doing business. Hunter, torpedo tubes loaded and locked. Just say the word, Colonel. Martinez's laugh was pure predatory joy. Gentlemen, let's show them why nobody messes with apex predators. What followed was less a space battle and more a masterclass in tactical coordination. The humans fought like they'd been born in the void between stars, their ship dancing through the attack formation with impossible grace while delivering devastating counterstrikes. Within minutes, 2 of the interceptors were drifting hulks, their crews evacuated in emergency pods. The third, Razor Leader's ship, was trying desperately to disengage when Hunter's torpedo found its mark. Razor Leader, this is your final warning, Martinez broadcast as the damaged interceptor limped away. Spread the word through your network. Anyone who accepts syndicate contracts against our operation will face similar consequences. As we watched the surviving bounty hunter disappear into hyperspace, I realized something had fundamentally changed in my understanding of the galaxy's power structure. For decades, criminals like the Hegemony Syndicate had operated with impunity because they were too connected to prosecute and too dangerous to confront directly. But humans, apparently, didn't care about political connections or overwhelming odds. They saw a problem that needed solving, and they solved it with the kind of focused violence that made apex predators what they were. So, I said as Martinez began plotting a course out of the system, what's our next target? Hunter was already pulling up intelligence files on syndicate operations. There's a forced labor camp on Altair 7. About 3,000 prisoners, mostly Centauri refugees from the border conflicts. Defenses? Orbital platform with defensive batteries, ground-based shield generators, and approximately 200 guards with military-grade equipment. I studied the tactical data, my mind already working through possible approaches. Difficult, but not impossible. We will need a distraction to draw off the orbital defenses, and someone will have to go in on foot to disable the shield generators. Martinez smiled, and I was beginning to recognize that expression. It was the look of a predator who'd found worthy prey. I like the way you think, Carricks. Welcome to the war. As the relentless dawn jumped to hyperspace, carrying us toward our next battle in humanity's unofficial crusade against galactic injustice, I found myself thinking about apex predators and the ecosystems they shaped through their presence. For too long, the galaxy had been an ecosystem dominated by parasites, criminals, corrupt officials, and opportunists who fed on the weak and defenseless. But now there were new apex predators in the void, and they were teaching everyone a fundamental lesson about the natural order. Humans weren't just another species trying to find their place in galactic civilization. They were evolution's answer to a question the rest of us hadn't even known we were asking. What happens when someone refuses to accept that injustice is simply the way things are? The answer, apparently, was war, and I couldn't wait to see how it ended.